Dr. Ben Carson, author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, One Nation, joins us now. Doc, good to see you again. And so it appears, it started earlier this week with a Wall Street Journal piece, and more we're hearing the word malaise, akin to what was bandied about during the Carter administration, when Americans just lost all faith in their government. What say you?
Well, first of all, this is an exceptional nation, and it happens to be the pinnacle nation in the world. Not the first one. There have been others before us: ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, Great Britain, France, Spain. All pinnacle nations, all thought they were going to be there forever, all went down the tubes. What happened in each case? They became enamored of sports and entertainment, lifestyles of the rich and famous. They tolerated political corruption. They lost their moral compass. They lost their vision. These are all the things that are happening to us. And the real question is, can we learn from the things that happened in the past that led to the decline of great nations, or must we inexorably go down the same path? I believe that we can learn, because we're different than all of those other nations. We are the child of every other nation. So we have all of that history, and we have their best interest in mind. We also are a Judeo-Christian nation. Now, I know the president says that we are not, but he needs to go back and read some of the documents of our founders, and I think he might be re-educated on that matter. Those values are the things that really gave us strength. Did we make mistakes? Of course we make mistakes. Every nation makes mistakes. But we are the most benign superpower the world has ever known. And if we go off the scene, we will be replaced by someone else. The likelihood of them being as benign as we are is extremely remote.
Well, that's a big question. And there was an op-ed in the New York Times earlier this week by a German newspaper editor saying, look, when Europe can afford to sit back because we've got America that has our back, America doesn't have the same luxury. No one's going to step in, no one good, if we step back and wait for somebody to fill this void.
Absolutely. But I do think that there's hope on the horizon. You know, as I go around the country and see these just humongous, enthusiastic crowds of people.
That's for you. That's for you, Dr. Carson. I don't know that that's, you know, necessarily for America in general, or the direction in which we're heading at the moment.
Well, but what I'm trying to convey to people, and I think it's getting through, is that they need to stop being intimidated, and they need to stand up for what they believe in, and they need to start having conversations. They need to talk to their uncle who's 80 years old, hasn't voted in 20 years, and make sure that he's apprised of what's going on and help him to get out there. And if he's an invalid, get him an absentee ballot and help him fill it out. There's millions and millions of people who are sitting on the sidelines who need to be reactivated, and they can be, but we each have to make it our personal mission.
To what extent do you feel that divisiveness is playing a role in what we're seeing right now?
It's playing an extremely large role in what we're doing. There are elements in our society whose only desire is to drive a wedge into any little crack that they can find. Therefore, race wars, income wars, age wars, gender wars, religious wars,
how damaging is
that you can possibly make. It's extremely damaging. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And the purpose of it, of course, is to make people throw their hands up in disgust, say, this isn't working, we need to move to another system. Go back and read the neo-Marxist literature. It's all right there. All of this stuff is not secret. That's why I encourage people all the time, go and read this stuff. You don't have to take my word for it.
You know, when you use terms like that, neo-Marxist and so on, that is what makes some people say, I like how this guy sounds, but he can never be the president because he will be described and painted and labeled as too extreme.
That's why I tell them to go read it for themselves. Vladimir Lenin, Saul Alinsky, Karl Marx, you know, I mean, these people just laid all of this stuff out. And there was a guy who was a former CIA agent by the name of Cleon Skousen, who wrote a book in 1958 called The Naked Communist. And it laid out the whole agenda. You would think by reading it that it was written last year, showing what they're trying to do to American families, what they're trying to do to our Judeo-Christian faith,
do you think,
what they're
let me ask you
doing
this,
to
Dr.
morality.
Carson, do you think that we are at the precipice of some fundamental sea change in this country right now?
Well, I think if the American people throw their hands up And the majority of people in this country actually do have common sense. I'm convinced of that. But if they give in, because remember, again, go read it for yourself. Number one rule, Saul Alinsky, you make the majority think that what they believe is no longer in vogue, that nobody with any intelligence thinks that way, and that the way you believe is the only way intelligent people believe. That way, they will give up. That way, they will submit. We cannot submit. We have got to stand up for America. And in the long run, I think it will be better for everybody, because even the most left-wing elements in our nation will benefit when we get this economy moving in the right direction again, when we manifest the right kind of leadership, when we reestablish the right kinds of programs in our country, when we shrink the government and in a kind way. Thousands of people, retire from the government each year.
Right.
Don't replace them.
Understood.
Just move them, shift them in from other places. In 4 years, we'll be down to the right size. We can focus on what the government's supposed to do, and that way they won't be sticking their nose in everybody's business.
Want the folks to know that Dr. Ben Carson placed second in the presidential polling at the Republican Leadership Conference, third in the CPAC straw poll, and he is a star now among many conservatives and Republicans, and many believe has a real shot at becoming the next president of the United States. We will continue to follow you, sir. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
As we mentioned a moment ago, we heard dire new warnings from Washington today. The foremost liberal constitutional law professor in the country testified that President Obama is threatening to fundamentally remake America by trampling the U.S. Congress and becoming a government unto himself.
While both Congress and the courts have lost authority over the decades, it is this body, the Congress, that has lost the most in this rise of a type of Uber presidency. The president's pledge to effectively govern alone is alarming. And what is most alarming is his ability to fulfill that pledge. When a president can govern alone, he can become a government unto himself, which is precisely the danger the framers sought to avoid. He has said that he's going to resolve the division with Congress by ordering changes on his own terms, as a majority of one. That's what makes it dangerous. It does not matter one iota if every president has violated the Constitution. That history doesn't make it anything less than a violation. Now, for those that remain silent in the face of this is not going to be our last president. What we're seeing increasingly is not just, in this case, a president pledging to go it alone, but in fact a president who can go it alone. The implications of that are significant. It turns this body into something that's discretionary.
Joining us now, Jonathan Turley, the lead witness today in that testimony on Capitol Hill. He is a constitutional attorney and professor at the George Washington University Law School. Professor Turley, good to see you tonight. It sounded dire listening to you today. I mean, put it in terms people can understand. Why? What is it President Obama is doing that you think makes him such a threat?
Well, the interesting thing is he's not doing it alone. He's arguing that if Congress is not going to act, then he's going to act, and he has been acting. Now, the court just ruled against him 9-0 on one of those actions. But what it represents is a change in our system. It represents an emerging dominant presidency. This trend's been going on for some time. But what's different now is that Congress has long been passive. And today you heard many members arguing not only that the president should be allowed to act unilaterally, but that the courts should block Congress from bringing these issues for judicial review. And it's moved now from a sense of self-loathing to a real self-destructive attitude among some members. As you know, the president in the State of the Union pledged that he would circumvent Congress, and half the members applauded wildly.
They did.
And it just left it, to me, a rather baffling moment. President was saying he was going to make them practically irrelevant, and half of the chamber erupted in applause.
You know, he has come out and said, the administration says, look, the executive branch has grown. We have administrative agencies that we need to administer the big government policies that the American people twice voted for when they put Barack Obama in the presidency. And moreover, they say, the president himself said this a week ago, he says, I've signed fewer executive orders than President Bush or any president in the past 100 years. Why are they giving me such a hard time?
Well, first of all, that last argument came up in my last testimony before the House Judiciary Committee a few months ago. And even the witness supporting the White House agreed with me that counting executive orders is a silly business. It has no relevance at all. You could have a single executive order that guts the government, or you could have 1,000 that do nothing. You can't look at the number of executive orders. This president did not start this trend. But when you look at the actions he's taken, they have gotten to a very dangerous point. He is arguing that even after asking for things in Congress refusing, he could do those very same acts. He can order those very same changes on his sole authority. That's what's different. That is, a new model of government is emerging. Now, that model is the very model that the framers told us to reject. Mm-hmm. It is the idea of a single person who says, I can get it done alone. Now, before we embrace that model, we need to have a serious national debate. In my view, the matter needs to get to the courts.
Professor Jonathan Turley, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Megan.
Breaking tonight, new fallout from a just-released audio recording allegedly showing a former White House cabinet member breaking the law to help get President Obama reelected. On the tape, you can hear, it sounds like, we are told it is, former Labor Secretary Hilda Solis in 2012, calling a subordinate in her department who works for her, and then illegally soliciting campaign donations for the president's reelection campaign. Listen.
This is Hilda Solis calling, just calling you off the record here. Wanted to ask you if you could help us get folks organized to come to a fundraiser that we're doing for Organizing for America's for Obama campaign on Friday at La Fonda at 6 p.m. There's a lot of folks that we know that are coming, but wanted to ask you if you might help contribute or get other folks to help out.
Congressman Darrell Issa is chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and today he played that audio recording for the first time in public. Your Democratic counterpart accused you of playing a stunt. He thought this was inappropriate. This is a top cabinet member breaking the law, as I understand it. Is there any dispute it's her?
There's no dispute. She was found to have violated the Hatch Act and resigned, along with Secretary Sebelius, who had a similar misuse where she used government funds to do a campaign event, and then when it was discovered, she retroactively paid back, but she had still committed a Hatch Act violation.
Hatch Act is you're not allowed to solicit campaign donations when you're working in the executive branch. It puts undue pressure on the people who work for you, and it's an abuse of your power.
Exactly, and Hilda Solis, who I served with in Congress, knew from Congress that soliciting your subordinates or people that worked for you in Congress was also a violation, different act, but a violation. So this was not news. It should not be news to a cabinet officer. But you understand today in our hearing, as we played that, and my ranking member is and has been in denial that anything could be wrong in this administration, the real offense was that a political appointee, a non-Senate confirmed political appointee who heads up the political affairs division that's just been stood back up in the White House.
Just to jump in, so Congressman Issa is now moving to a different but somewhat related issue where he feels that he's been obstructed. Go ahead, sir.
It's related because the Hatch Act is under our committee's jurisdiction. We were doing oversight. We asked this individual, David Simas, who is now stood back up something that President Obama shut down because it was found by special counsel to be illegal. He stood it back up, and we want to know how it works. We want to make sure it doesn't violate the Hatch Act. The president asserted through his counsel the most absurd claim, which was that there was an inherent immunity from coming to Congress by this political appointee, and he didn't show up. This is sort of
right. So you wanted to talk to this guy. You wanted to talk to this guy about the Hilda Solis matter. You got stiff-armed. He didn't show, and basically the administration is trying to stonewall. But not to worry, because DOJ is allegedly looking into Ms. Solis and her violation, so we should all rest easy tonight, correct?
No, not so much. Ultimately, the American people need to know, and they need to have confidence that their tax dollars are not being used, as the IRS did, to go after political if you will, enemies of the president, the Tea Party in group. We need to know that they're not using the power of the presidency and the money of the taxpayers to campaign for people in this upcoming election. And every chairman who's had my job before that has had a role in trying to make sure that doesn't happen.
And
Henry
before
Waxman
I
spent
let you go, because I'm up
years.
against a hard break in 45 seconds, but I understand
Yes.
in related news tonight, the DOJ will now investigate these missing Lois Lerner emails. Can you confirm that?
It's a start. They said that they now are going to look at it. Quite frankly, we still want a special prosecutor. We want somebody who is immune from the influence of Eric Holder, a man who was held in contempt by Congress. And more importantly, we have a witness that didn't show on a lawful subpoena. It's already been decided by the courts that this individual must come. We expect that they're going to have to bring him. If they don't, we have very little choice but to assert our rights at Congress. We hope that you'll continue cooperating.
Chairman Issa, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,